Okay, somebody corrected me. I went off on a rant earlier about Steve Jobs. It wasn't so much a rant. It was just a response to this guy who was saying, hey, you know, we need the 1%. They're the job creators and all that. And I'm like, yeah, you know, you know, he said Steve Jobs started with nothing. Apparently Steve Jobs, I haven't read the biography. So I shouldn't have said anything before I did. My correspondent here says Steve Jobs was raised in a lower middle class environment. He went to Reed College. His parents had to borrow from their life savings to send him. Big part of his success was because he forced his parents to move. That's an interesting thing for a kid to do. With Steve becoming friends with a neighbor who eventually introduced him to Steve Wozniak. Bill Gates, on the other hand, did come from money, and his family's wealth undoubtedly contributed, et cetera, et cetera. I would add, though, that, you know, I'd go back to my original point. If he had been born poor and a minority, it might have been a very different story. The point is that none of us gets here just on our own. That was the point that I was trying to make. And many of these giant monopolies, whether it's Microsoft or Apple or you know, J.P. Morgan Chase or General Motors, or I mean, you fill in the blanks. Any of these giant companies that tend to dominate industries, that they're getting there by virtue of the fact that we are providing them with the infrastructure necessary. We the people, we the taxpayers, by providing them with a court system where they can enforce contracts. The vast majority of our court system is used by business. It's not the criminal. You know, we all watch you watch the cop shows, you see the criminal justice system. That's a small part of the cost of the court system. Most of the court system is used by corporations. Who pays for it? You and I do. It's paid for with taxes. And for example, I mean, just as one example, I mean, our businesses in America use an educated workforce, and it's educated at our expense. Our businesses in America use public utilities that are paid for, you know, at least the siting of them is paid for by us. And that's not a bad thing. It's just an acknowledgement that nobody got there on their own. This idea that somebody is entitled to take $1 billion in income, that somehow anybody could be, their work could be so valuable that it's worth taking $1 billion a year in income. Like, you know, some of these guys on Wall Street do. I would say to you, it's a scam. I mean, there are brain surgeons and heart surgeons and rocket scientists and high-level engineers and people who are just doing really, really difficult, really, really brilliant work, who spent their lives getting to the point where they could do that work, and they're making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, maybe $1 million a year. And they're taking it as ordinary income, and they're paying a maximum 39% because they're taking a paycheck on it. But the Mitt Romneys of the world, the guys who figured out how to game the system and make $20, $30, $40 million a year, $100 million a year, $200 million a year, the Stephen J. Hemsleys of the world with his $1 billion of income from United Healthcare, or Dollar Bill McGuire, who preceded him with $1.6 billion in income for running a health insurance company? Really? And so much of it coming in the form of stock options that you, when you convert them, you pay a maximum of 5 to 20% income tax on, whereas that brain surgeon is paying 39%. These people aren't noble capitalists, brought themselves up by the bootstrap folks. They're people who figured out how to game the system. And in many cases, it's not just that they've figured out how to game the system. Because the Supreme Court, this constitutional monarchy that we have here in the United States, the Supreme Court has laid out a brand new set of rules for doing business in the United States and doing politics in the United States when they discovered back in 1971 in the Buckley versus Vallejo decision, they discovered that money is protected by the First Amendment. Now, I have the Constitution right here in front of me. And the First Amendment is one sentence long. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Did you hear the word money in there? Listen really carefully, because the Supreme Court 38 years ago last week said money is protected by the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances, period. I don't see money in there anywhere, but 5 right-wingers on the Supreme Court do. And ever since 1803 in the Marbury case, although it only happened twice in the first half of the 19th, it didn't happen at all in the late 18th century. It only happened twice in the first half of the 19th century. Marbury v. Madison, 1803, Dred Scott, 1856. Only twice did the Supreme Court say that they had the power to strike down a law passed by Congress. Judicial supremacy. We are more powerful than the legislature. We are more powerful than the President of the United States. The first 70 years of our republic, it only happened twice. Now, virtually every single case the Supreme Court takes, they are asserting in those cases that they have the power to strike down the law, or, as in this case, finding the word money in the First Amendment when it's not there, to create law. They did the same thing in Roe v. Wade when they came up with the idea that there's 3 different trimesters and each trimester should have different rules. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that the Supreme Court can make law. That's the job of the legislature. So anyhow, they said that money is protected by the First Amendment. And then they said in the 14th Amendment that corporations are protected by the 14th Amendment. Now here's Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. This is the part in which they found this. This was ratified in 1868, July 9th, 1868, in order to help free the slaves, right? The 13th Amendment bans slavery. The 14th Amendment establishes civil rights for former slaves. And the 15th Amendment gives the absolute right to vote to African Americans. Okay, these 3 amendments passed after the Civil War. And tell me if you hear the word corporation in here somehow, because the Supreme Court also, this is 2 years after Buckley, in a case called First National Bank versus Bellotti, decided that corporations are persons. Now, there's other cases, too, where they had, implied or suggested that. But not just persons, not just actors who have to pay taxes. I mean, we all agree that, they have some sort of status. They pay taxes, they can own land, things like that, sign contracts. But that they were persons protected by the Constitution. That's a whole different ball of wax. The 14th Amendment, Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, which would include slaves, or former slaves, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And that very last phrase of that section, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws, that is what the Supreme Court said applies to corporations. Now, I didn't know that Abe Lincoln fought the Civil War to free the corporations. But our Supreme Court tells us this. And the net of all that is that, taking this back to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, is that because of these 2 decisions, these giant corporations have been able to buy politicians.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And they continue to not only buy politicians, but intimidate politicians, and thus get laws passed that make the rich richer, and of course everybody else poor.